What I would say to guys or girls who are still searching for that right person is not to settle. I think that you just have to trust the process. You have to trust that God knows the timing and God knows the person, and just not to settle. I think it's easy to get in a rush and make sacrifices with your standard, with what you want in a person. I think you can just say, well, maybe this isn't right or this isn't right. I will say this: everyone is a work in progress, and not everyone comes from a perfect family. And I think it's important to look at someone who is learning, someone who's growing, but more importantly, someone who is chasing after God and has a faith and wants to become all that they can be. And I think that is exactly what you would say too.
No, that's not what I'd say. No, I would say become the best version of yourself to bring into a relationship. And to become the best version of yourself, you got to know yourself. I mean, be aware. If you've got an anger problem, admit it. If you've got this problem, I mean, if you've got issues that you need to deal with, be actively working on those things. And then the second thing I would say is find somebody that brings out the best in you. You don't want to marry somebody that suppresses you, that keeps you down, that makes you feel less than. You want to find somebody that brings out the best in you, and you bring out the best in them.
Yep.
Discover while working together.
There you go.
Oh, no. You go.
I'm a neat freak, okay? She's kind of a neat freak, but she's never met a drawer or a cabinet she cannot leave open. It drives me nuts.
Paul is a neat freak. And he needs everything perfect. And I think it's okay to leave a drawer open here or there, especially if you're going to go back to it later. So the way that Paul does things and the way that I do things are very different. And I think in the beginning that can be aggravating.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But I think the longer that we've been married, we have figured out that those are the little things that you don't need to sweat. They don't matter. We don't try to change each other. And Paul is a neat freak, and he likes things a certain way. And I have learned that I want things to be good for him. I want to have a peaceful home. I want to have things cleaned up. And he's learned that I don't do things exactly the way he does. I'm organized in a messy way.
I actually, it's been a very positive thing for our relationship, because every time I push a drawer shut or close a cabinet, I think, man, I love this woman. I love this woman. So it's actually, you turned it around. Instead of it driving you crazy, it's just another reason I love her. The most important thing in anybody's life is listening to Jesus, because he'll speak to you. He says that my sheep know my voice. So that means if you're his follower, you're his son, you're his daughter, you know his voice. And it doesn't matter what goes on in your head. You may have infatuation, there are a lot of things going on in your head, but what is Jesus speaking to your heart? That's the spiritual side. The practical side, as a father of daughters and sons, what do you look for in a husband or in a wife? I would say, speaking to the women, what you'd look for in a husband would be somebody that's hardworking. You want to have somebody that is unqualifiedly kind, always kind. You want to have somebody that's patient. But I think those are important things, just hardworking and kind and positive. And I think those are really important traits. If those aren't there, those are red flags that you go up to say, now, wait a minute, maybe this isn't right.
Yeah. I agree that those are the most important. I would say kindness. I would say a heart that really wants to serve God and can lead you in that direction. I don't look to Paul to lead my faith, but I look to him to know that he has a faith and he has a relationship, and that's going to keep us together. I think I alluded to this, but also somebody that can have fun and isn't too serious. Someone that is hardworking, just like Paul said. Somebody that, if you want to have kids, that you can see them being a good mother or a good father. I think that that's important because you can see those things early on. I think looking for someone that is flexible, someone that as seasons in life change, because you guys are kind of on the beginning of your either early married or you're wanting to get married, and we've been married a long time and we've gone through a lot of stages and changes, and I think just working together and being flexible is important because life throws things at you that you don't expect, and some are really great, and some not so great, and you have to have somebody that you're really aligned with and you can go through the good and the bad with.
I didn't say this, but also you have to respect each other. I think kindness is really respect, but I think you have to have a deep respect for the person that you're dating, and they have to have that deep respect for you. I think if that's not there, those are red flags in my mind that say, "Hey, pause at least. This is a yellow light. Go slow."
Yeah, I just thought of something I think is really important, and that is the ability to ask for forgiveness and to forgive quickly, because nobody is perfect in a relationship, and it should flow and go both ways. If I need to ask for forgiveness, I do that, and Paul is so quick to ask for forgiveness. And the opposite is that we are quick to forgive and to not hold a grudge and let things go, because you shouldn't be keeping a tab in a marriage, except of the good things, not the bad.
Yeah, that's good.
I think it's easy when you want to be married to make a list of all the things that you want in a spouse, but sometimes we get really nitty gritty and that holds us back because we get into such specifics and they don't matter, and there's like billions of people walking the earth, but you have to know exactly the character that you're looking for. You have to know the type of person that they are as far as kindness and like we talked about, like hardworking, and but when you get into hair color and height, and you're kind of setting yourself up for a really narrow, and those are just not the important things. So I would say it's okay to have a preferred list, but I think you have to keep in your mind what is important and what really is what it is that you're looking for in a godly mate and partner in life.
Yeah, I think sometimes you can make a list to make that person almost a god that's going to please you, or that's going to fit in with your life. God usually puts us with people that rub us a little wrong and rub the edges off. So I think sometimes you can make a list to make a relationship comfortable. Relationship's not always comfortable. In certain ways, it's very comfortable, but Jen and I are very different. She's an Enneagram 9, I'm an Enneagram 1. I'm intense. I don't even know I'm intense. She has this scale. Sometimes when I answer her, she'll say, "Paul, that was on an intensity level of about 8. Whereas I think that's just normal for me. I'm just talking. So I think, if she was looking for somebody that wasn't intense, she wouldn't have found me. If I was looking for somebody who was always punctual, I wouldn't have chosen Jen if that would have been on my list. I'd throw your list out, listen to your heart, and make the most important things the most important, and not get into the too many details.
Yeah. I have a specific, if Paul had said, I'm only looking for someone that comes from a Christian home, or someone that comes from a 2-parent house, or if he had this Christian box per se of like, she can only fit this model, I would have been out, because I didn't come from that. But I think Paul, I'm so glad that he was able to separate and say, she came from this, but she came through this, but this is not who she is. And giving me that opportunity to be who God made me to be and not hold me, to where I came from.
Yeah, and I don't think Jen had divorced with a kid on her mind when she made her list. Mm-hmm. But thank God she said yes. Well, I think serving in missions has bonded us together as a couple and also as a family. But I think the 2 times for me that I questioned whether this was the right thing was when we got caught in the post-election violence in Kenya, and the violence was coming right down on us. And I thought, what if something happens to my kids here? Did I do the right thing bringing them here? Second time is when my son Jackson got malaria, significant. He was out for 3 days. We didn't, know how severe it was going to be, whether he was going to recover fully or not. And those times make you question whether or not, you're doing the right thing. And I've always taught my kids, if I've taught you a comfortable Christianity, I haven't taught you right, because I don't think we should be comfortable in our Christianity. I think we should always be stretching, and, God should be able to put us in places that kind of stretch our faith and make us uncomfortable. But in those times when it's one thing for me to get malaria, or me to, suffer violence or something like that, but putting our kids in harm's way was really something that gave me pause to think, is this the right thing?
Mm-hmm. And we made those decisions together. I don't think it was, I think we paused and we talked about it, and we continued because we felt like that's what God was telling us to do, not because we felt pride about it, like, well, it's what we do. Like, we were willing to step back and say, but we felt like this is where God's pushing us to go. I think working in missions together also, there was a time when we were able to travel as a family. Then there was a time when I wasn't able to travel, and I stayed back with our kids, or we went for shorter trips. And I think that strengthened our relationship. I know I have people come up to me all the time and they're like, I don't know how you do that. Like, how do you let Dr. Paul go? And I'm like, well, I don't let him go. I think we see it as a partnership. I think we talk about it.
Yeah.
Paul always asks me, this is what I'm thinking about going. How does that feel? And I think God just gives me the grace that I need. I will admit, like the last 2 weeks, it kind of starts lifting. I'm like, oh, I'm really ready for him to come home. And I miss him, certainly, but God just gives me the grace to do it. And we do that together. So I think we see, whether I'm with him or whether I'm not, as though we're doing it together. I'm not letting him do anything. And it's been I think it's strengthened us in so many ways.
I think even those situations that bonded us as a family, all of a sudden our kids, they're reading Psalm 91 under their mosquito net at night, believing God's going to protect them. They're believing for their brother to get healed from malaria. So all those things kind of bond you. The other thing it did, taking our kids on the mission field, a little bit off the subject, but I think it applies. It changed their lens. Just like there's a lens in a camera, they don't see the world through the Western prosperous mindset that very often Christians see the world through. They see the world through the eyes of the poor, and through the eyes of people that are overlooked, and through the eyes of people that are neglected. And so someone once told me that they used to think of the world as a prosperous place with pockets of poverty until they traveled, and then they realized that the world is a place of poverty with pockets of prosperity. And I think that's kind of the way my kids see the world now, and I think that's one of the benefits of persevering and doing what God called you to do, even though it's hard.
Mm-hmm. And I think they all went into certain professions that in a way don't have anything to do with missions, but in another way they care deeply about the marginalized. And so in their perspective careers, they always have that in the back of their mind. And then in their personal lives, they look for ways that they can serve. So they're not traveling overseas, but I think it changed them, like you said, and they live differently because of it.
I don't think you can be frivolous in your faith, but I also think if God calls you to do something hard, you got to do it and believe that He'll have His hands under you to help. Even the move from Little Rock, we were deeply involved in our church. I had a very successful practice. I was set for the next 30 years. And yet when the voice of Jesus said, give up your practice, move to Houston and help, doing those uncomfortable things, I think, are a part of the Christian life. A little bit off the subject, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Also, when we first moved here, it wasn't easy. It wasn't like God told us to do something and we did it and everything fell into place. It was actually very, very difficult, and not for just a year. There were years when we really had to trust God. But I think when you just keep doing the last thing He told you to do, then there's a moment when you realize that faithful choice suddenly shifts and you see God's plan. So I think there is a moment when you step out in obedience. It's almost like when you get out of bed at night and it's dark, and you just have to keep walking and trusting that God told you to do it. And then eventually I think you see the bigger plan, which for us was taking our first missions trip. and we lived
Starting
here.
the M3 conference.
Starting the M3 conference, and we just saw God be faithful. But it's not, I think following God is not always easy, and you don't always see his plan right away. But if you can just keep doing the last thing he told you to do until he tells you to do something else, eventually it all fits together and makes sense.
You guys probably heard of the Message Bible, but it's written by a guy named Eugene. It's a paraphrase, actually, but it's written by Eugene Peterson. He has this phrase, it's actually the title of one of his books that I love. The Christian life is really just a long obedience in the same direction. So I mean, it's just obeying the heart of Jesus, and whatever he tells you to do, whether it's easy, whether it's hard, whether it makes sense, whether it doesn't make sense, and just to continually do that, and then at the end of your life, you're going to be glad you did.